I found a clip of Michael Saylor basically saying that he's going to buy as much Bitcoin as he possibly can. In this video, I want to go through the clip. Let's get started. Here's the clip. We'll watch the whole thing, and then I'm going to go into it and dissect it a little bit and give you some more context.
Is there a ceiling that MicroStrategy has in mind in terms of how much Bitcoin it can hold? Or, is it kind of unlimited and really depends on what is happening in the market?
No, we'll just keep buying, right? The price is going to go up. It's going to get exponentially harder, and the price is going to go up exponentially higher, and we'll just keep buying. And at some point, if we get to 5% of the supply, Bitcoin's probably going to be 1 million a coin. And if we get to 7.5% of the supply, Bitcoin will be 10 million a coin.
Yeah.
And then we'll be, if I'm lucky enough to grind to 10% of the supply, Bitcoin's going to be 50 million a coin, and someone will be whining that whatever, we have too much Bitcoin, but other people will have $400 trillion of wealth, so, our view is it's a ratchet, and we're just going to keep cranking on the ratchet, and there's massive leverage here. And I think everybody's winning if we do that.
I think the main point that I got from that clip was that Michael Saylor wants as much Bitcoin as possible. They're not going to stop. I guarantee you that once they do get to 10%, they'll continue accumulating, because at that point, they'll probably be one of the biggest financial institutions in the world. Since it's only about a minute, I want to go through it in detail. So let's go through it again.
Is there a ceiling that MicroStrategy has in mind in terms of how much Bitcoin it can hold? Or, is it kind of unlimited and really depends on what is happening in the market?
No, we'll just keep buying, right? The price is going to go up. It's going to get exponentially harder, and the price is going to go up exponentially higher, and we'll just keep buying. And
they're going to keep buying no matter what. They're going to keep buying whether the price goes down, whether the price goes up. They're going to keep buying as long as people are willing to give away dollars for Bitcoin. The goal here is to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible before anybody else really figures it out. If you understand how Bitcoin works, you know that it's money. It's the only form of money that can be used anywhere in the world. It's decentralized. Nobody can control it. Nobody can stop it. So it's money. If one entity has all of the money, what does that mean? It means they have all of the power. If MicroStrategy has 10% of the world's supply of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is basically the biggest asset in the world, what does that mean? MicroStrategy may be able to buy Microsoft. It may be able to buy McDonald's. It may be able to buy Walmart.
Right? The price is going to go up. It's going to get exponentially harder, and the price is going to go up exponentially higher.
I think what he means here by exponentially harder is, number one, it's going to get exponentially harder for him to accumulate more Bitcoin, because fewer and fewer Bitcoin will be available in exchange for US dollars. But I think he's also referring to Bitcoin's supply. By harder, he means that's more difficult to produce. So it's more difficult to create more of. We can see here, over time, the amount of Bitcoin being produced every 10 minutes is halving. So it's decreasing by 50%. Right now, there's 3.125 Bitcoin being created every 10 minutes. At some point, it'll be 1.5625. Some point in 2028 or 2027. By 2032, the supply of Bitcoin will halve again to 0.78125 Bitcoin per every 10 minutes. In 2036, it halves again to 0.39 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. By 2044, there's only going to be 0.1 Bitcoin being created every 10 minutes. This is insane. Today, you can buy 0.1 Bitcoin for $9,500. At this point, the entire world's computing will be dedicated to the Bitcoin network to accumulate 0.09765625 Bitcoin. These are the number of Bitcoin, but each Bitcoin can be split into 100 million Satoshis. So this number represents 9,765,625 Satoshis. Today, you can buy exactly this amount of Bitcoin for 9,427 US dollars. This would be 13,080 Canadian dollars, 8,373 euros, 7,113 pounds, 805,376 Indian rupees. And for some reason, I can only get the Chinese yuan offshore number. If I hit Chinese yuan, it doesn't give me anything. So this is CNH Chinese yuan offshore. It would be 68,333 Chinese yuan. If we take a look at Bitcoin's historical price, we can see here that in August of 2010, one Bitcoin cost 10 cents. So 0.1 Bitcoin cost you 1 penny. So if you had bought 0.1 Bitcoin when the block subsidy was 50 Bitcoin, it would have cost you 1 cent. But today, the same amount of Bitcoin is going to cost you about $9,600. Keep in mind that the majority of this time, most of the money flowing in was from retail investors, and retail investors don't have as much money as institutional investors. So that first period from August of 2010 until today was about 15 years. From May of 2025 to some point in 2044, what will the growth look like in that 19-year period? By then, 99.8% of Bitcoin's total supply will already have been mined and it'll be circulating. After 2044, only 41,000 Bitcoin will be produced. We can see the numbers here. So if I just highlight these, we can see the number at the bottom right here, 41,015 Bitcoin and 62,256,000 Satoshis. Bitcoin's inflation rate is decreasing over time because a lot of the supply was front loaded. We can see here in the first 4 years, 50% of the supply was mined. Even today, something like 94% of the supply has already been mined. When Michael Saylor was saying that Bitcoin is going to get harder, he was saying that Bitcoin is going to become more difficult to produce over time. We can see here from January 3rd, 2009 to November 28th, 2012, 5 Bitcoin were produced every minute, or it took 12 seconds to produce 1 Bitcoin. From November 28th, 2012 to July 9th, 2016, the supply halved. So it went from 5 Bitcoin per minute to 2.5 Bitcoin per minute, or it took 24 seconds to produce 1 Bitcoin on average. Over time, this number is going to keep decreasing until it goes to 0 around 2140. Now, if we think of this logically, if it takes more time to produce something, the price should go up. And we can see that happening with Bitcoin. In the first epoch, in the first 4-year period, the highest price of Bitcoin was $31.91. In the second epoch, the highest price for Bitcoin was $1,163. In the third epoch, it was $19,333, and in the fourth epoch, it was $68,982.20. Over time, as it becomes more difficult to produce Bitcoin or as it takes more resources, Bitcoin's price will rise. It'll continue to rise until it's appropriately priced. Today, we price Bitcoin in terms of US dollars, which are essentially worthless because you can create as much of them as you want to if you have the power to do so. The wealthy can go to banks and they can borrow as many dollars as they want to, and they can use them to buy Bitcoin. That's exactly what Michael Saylor is taking advantage of. He's producing more shares of his company, selling them into the market, and buying more Bitcoin. Once wealthy people figure out what Bitcoin is, I guarantee you they're going to start taking mortgages against their houses to buy Bitcoin. They're going to take margin loans against their stock portfolios to buy Bitcoin. More money is going to enter Bitcoin than ever before because of this and all of these cycles. Everything here is going to be irrelevant. A lot of people look at these previous cycles and they think that Bitcoin's price isn't going to go very high because they see the prices here. It took 15 years for Bitcoin's price to go from 0 to about 100,000. So it'll take another 15 years to go to 200,000, then another 15 years to go to 300,000. But I don't think they quite understand what compounding is. You don't look at Bitcoin's growth based on the dollar value, you look at the growth based on the percentage. I think the amount of money coming into Bitcoin over the next couple of decades is going to be orders of magnitude bigger than what's already come into the market. Bitcoin has a finite supply, while the number of dollars that can be used to buy Bitcoin are basically unlimited. So Bitcoin's price doesn't have a ceiling. I think one of the biggest traps that people are falling for is they're selling their Bitcoin to Michael Saylor. They're selling their Bitcoin to an entity that's never going to sell its Bitcoin again. It's buying it and it's never going to sell it again. I think Michael Saylor is going to borrow money to pay off his loans rather than having to sell Bitcoin. He's going to use the current financial system to buy as much Bitcoin as he can. He's going to bring his future consumption to the present. He's basically going to time travel to get as much Bitcoin as he possibly can. And then he's going to use the exact same financial system to pay off his debts. He's going to borrow even more money and he's going to pay off his debts. This is a game to him. He knows what he's doing. I think most people are going to open their eyes to this after 99% of Bitcoin's supply has been mined and already is in circulation. This epoch number 5, is for the institutions because most retail investors are just ignoring Bitcoin. Even the people who have Bitcoin already are selling. How do you think Michael Saylor is getting 15,000 Bitcoin a week? People are selling it to him. They're giving him their Bitcoin. As Bitcoin's price goes up, Michael Saylor gets to buy even more Bitcoin because his company's financials get even stronger, so he's able to borrow even more money to buy more Bitcoin. So when retail investors figure out what Bitcoin is, in these two epochs here, number 7 and 8, what do you think Bitcoin's price is going to be? Every 10 minutes, there's only going to be 0.78 Bitcoin being produced. We can see here in around 2034, 2035, 99% of the supply will already have been mined. Right now, 0.31 Bitcoin are being produced every minute. At that point, 0.07 Bitcoin will be produced every minute. I think the market's expectations are about to be completely blown apart. People are going to be selling their real estate for Bitcoin. They're going to be selling their stocks for Bitcoin. The wealthy are going to be borrowing as much money as they can to get to one Bitcoin. Right now, MicroStrategy owns about 553,000 Bitcoin. We can see that here. The total value of that Bitcoin is $53.5 billion, and that's 2.6% of the total 21 million supply. If MicroStrategy wants to get to 5% of the 21 million Bitcoin, they're going to have 1,050,000 Bitcoin. If Michael Saylor wants to get to 7.5% of the supply, that would mean he has to hold 1.575 million Bitcoin. 10% of the supply would mean 2.1 million Bitcoin. So with all of that knowledge, let's go back to the video now.
Right. The price is going to go up. It's going to get exponentially harder, and the price is going to go up exponentially higher, and we'll just keep buying. And at some point, if we get to 5% of the supply, Bitcoin's probably going to be $1 million a coin. And if we get to 7.5% of the supply, Bitcoin will be 10 million a coin.
The reason why he thinks that the price is going to go so much higher is because it gets harder to accumulate Bitcoin. Over time, fewer and fewer people are willing to sell their Bitcoin for dollars. So you have to offer more and more dollars to bring sellers to the market. At some point, Bitcoin will run out at every single price, meaning that Bitcoin's price can literally go to infinity. There's no limit to the amount of dollars that you'll be able to use to buy Bitcoin, because at some point people won't want dollars for Bitcoin.
If I'm lucky enough to grind to 10% of the supply, Bitcoin's going to be 50 million a coin, and someone will be whining that whatever, we have too much Bitcoin, but other people will have $400 trillion of wealth. So our view is it's a ratchet, and we're just going to keep cranking on the ratchet, and there's massive leverage here. And I think everybody's winning if we do that.
And this is the kind of post that Michael Saylor was referring to at the end there. This is really stupid. We can see that Wendy was responding to this post here. Michael Saylor's strategy to raise $84 billion to purchase more Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is going to sell more shares, they're going to issue more debt, and they're going to buy more Bitcoin with it. People are going to complain, people are going to whine, they're going to say that this is not fair, they're going to say that it's becoming centralized, they're going to say whatever they can. But Michael Saylor is going to keep buying because he doesn't care. So instead of complaining, I think the best thing that you can do is tell people to actually buy Bitcoin, to put it in cold storage so that Michael Saylor can't get to it. Tell people to not sell their Bitcoin. Instead of telling people to buy random cryptocurrencies, tell them to buy Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the only asset that will matter in 50 years. In the meantime, Bitcoin is going to keep rising and rising in price in terms of stocks, in terms of housing, in terms of other cryptocurrencies, in terms of gold. We're going to see real estate investors sell their rental properties to buy Bitcoin. Right now, you buy a rental property for about 5 Bitcoin. In the future, it'll be worth 1 Bitcoin. Then it'll be worth half a Bitcoin. That's because Bitcoin's price is going to appreciate much, much faster than real estate's price, because real estate has so much more headaches involved with owning it. You have to deal with tenants, you have to deal with realtors, you have to deal with maintenance and repairs, you have to deal with lawyers. All of that adds up. It's all stress that's not worth taking. With Bitcoin, you don't have to worry about all that stress. So a company like MicroStrategy can just hold as much Bitcoin as it wants to, and it doesn't even have to do anything. It can just sit back, relax, and just enjoy. But MicroStrategy is not that kind of company. They want to accumulate as much Bitcoin as they can. So your goal should be to buy Bitcoin right now. If you're selling Bitcoin, I think you're going to regret it. I think this cycle could be completely different from other cycles. Now, keep in mind, I could be wrong, but everything points towards this cycle being different because number one, we have the ETFs. Number two, we have the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Number three, we have MicroStrategy issuing more and more debt, more and more shares to buy as much Bitcoin as it can. I think we're going to see more and more companies do this. Right now, there are something like 50 companies doing this already. Over time, we're going to see 500 companies. We're going to see 5,000 companies. Every single company on earth is going to do this, or they're going to fail. If we take a look at how everything is valued right now versus Bitcoin, we can see that gold is worth 11 times what Bitcoin is worth. Microsoft is worth like 1.7 times what Bitcoin is worth. Apple is worth about 1.6 times what Bitcoin is worth. Nvidia is worth about 1.4 times what Bitcoin is worth. Amazon and Google are worth about the same as what Bitcoin is worth. The way that I see it, all of these companies are going to be worth in total less than 21 million Bitcoin. That could happen either by these company values decreasing, or it could happen by Bitcoin's value surpassing all of them. Right now, gold has a market cap of about $22 trillion. The bond market is worth about $300 trillion, and real estate is worth about $300 trillion as well. The majority of the value that's attributed to all of these assets is purely because they're being used as a store of value. The way that I see it, Michael Saylor is just using the rules to his advantage. He understands Bitcoin while the majority of people don't, so he's buying while they're selling. He's going to keep doing that until he has 10, 15, 20% of the supply. I personally don't think he's going to get to even 5%, let alone 7.5%, but I do know that he's going to keep trying. I think there's going to be more than enough competition over the next few months that he won't get to those numbers, and that's a good thing. I don't want him to own all the Bitcoin. I want the supply to be distributed. But don't take this the wrong way. I'm not complaining. He's doing what he has to. This is just how the market works. If you're worried about Bitcoin supply being centralized and the majority of people not being able to buy anymore, there's nothing that you can do about it. Focus on what you can control, help the people around you, create content online, share your knowledge. The reason why this works is because it plants the seed in more people's minds, and eventually they start trying to figure out what Bitcoin is, and maybe they can buy before Michael Saylor has everything.